welcome. I am here today in Ocala, Florida, getting a little break from our Pennsylvania fall/winter. And I'm here with a guest for the show. This is Sharon Madera. And Sharon is a behavior consultant. She's a lifelong um, rider
Hmm.
and equestrian. And also, you breed Iberian horses.
I do. It's an addiction.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
So as we get into it, I actually want to ask you more about the breed, but maybe we'll just start with what is kind of the quick version of your horse journey through your life?
Okay, sure. Lifelong horse addict, like you and probably most of your audience. In my early teens, I had the opportunity to ride with a woman who had trained in France. So her classical schoolmasters were very light, worked off the seat, nothing behind the vertical, pole the highest. So my riding experience was, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was quite unique and quite a privilege. I did a lot of different things. I evented. I've done fox hunting. When I lived in Texas for a while, I had flat shod gaited horses for trail riding, and we did versatility and things like that with them. A lot of different things, some upper level dressage, but I've always kind of loved the classical, like the old historic classical and high collection. And so I've kind of come full circle back to that, and that's what I'm focused on now with my riding.
Awesome. Well, you have a beautiful farm here in Ocala.
Thanks.
And what was kind of your dream with having this farm and also having your horses?
Sure. Well, I guess I should interject one other sort of thing, and that is, for many years, for about 25 years on the career side, I was in the companion animal behavior side of things. So dog and cat, I had a company, we produced products that were for positive reinforcement training, behavior modification, humane type products. And so I learned a lot about animal behavior in that whole world. And of course, I've had horses, my whole life. But what I realized was interesting was there wasn't as much understanding of the science of behavior, the science of learning in the horse world, as there was, for instance, in the dog world and in zookeeping and marine mammals and the like. And so, it got me kind of pondering even about myself. It's like, how come I know all these things with other species, but, I'm not necessarily applying it with my horses? And that began to change maybe 10, 15 years ago. And so I, a number of years ago, went ahead and got my certification with the IAABC, which is the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants with horses. And one of my goals with this farm was to try to set up kind of a little microcosm where the latest understanding about best practices for horse welfare, from management, training, husbandry, all these sort of things, could be this little place where we'd have everything from young foals, brood mares, breeding stallions, horses in training, and looking to apply the latest, best scientific knowledge in how we keep them, how we train them, how we improve welfare, and how we improve the relationship that people have with their horses.
Yeah.
So that's why we built a classroom. We do education, and as much as we can with that too.
Yeah. Well, I should have started with this as part of your introduction too. Is that I came to know you as you kind of had the vision and initiated the Progressive Equine Behavior and Training Forum,
Right.
Which is a really, really, I think, unique and valuable group that's forming around that. So tell me a little bit more about when you decided to move from working with the companion animal in that company and selling the product line there to moving forward with doing the certification and becoming a behavior consultant for horses.
Sure. Well, as I said, I mean, it's I've lifelong addict, right? I used to always joke when I was in the dog world, it's like, oh my gosh, if only I could make some money with horses. And honestly, I'm going to tell you right now, there ain't money to be made in horses. But fortunately, when I sold my company, I was able to take that and kind of segue that into investing in this farm and being able to kind of try to create this environment, this learning environment, learning lab, and we'll see how long we can keep it going, right?
Yeah. So, as a behavior consultant, because I think in the horse world, that's actually even a term or a profession that I would love to see people get more familiar
Mm,
with what the role of a behavior consultant can be.
sure.
So, can you describe
Yeah.
how that
Yeah.
role fits in?
Right. So in the horse world, we're very familiar with horse trainers, right?
Yes.
If we have a problem, we think, oh, I got to find a trainer who can help me fix it.
Mhm.
And that is similar in the dog world. A lot of times people will go, there's a lot of dog trainers, and there's not really anything in this country that there's no standards,
Mhm.
let's put it that way, that anybody can hang a shingle out and say, hey, I'm a horse trainer, hey, I'm a dog trainer, and there's no way to know for sure what is that person's actual background, what's their expertise, what's their knowledge, what's their skill set.
Yeah.
Um, so in the field of animal behavior, there are some very stringent requirements. There are several different types of behaviorists. There's different certifying bodies, and it's a pretty rigorous criteria to
Mhm.
meet. So we have veterinary behaviorists. Those are veterinarians who've then done a full residency in animal behavior and have sat for board exams. There are PhD applied animal behaviorists, and these are folks, again, they have a PhD and then they've also gone through a whole other certification process. My certification is with the IAABC, and we have both the requirement for knowledge base about the science of learning, which
Mhm.
applies to all species, as well as practical field application, hours in the field, successful resolution with clients and horses of specific problems.
Mhm.
And then with all of these certifications, we're also required to have continuing education. So you can't maintain that title without making sure that you are up to date on what's going on, what we're learning. And our
Mhm.
body of knowledge is always expanding
Yeah.
and refining.
Yeah. So, what is an example of first maybe a case that you've seen as a behavior consultant?
Sure. And you know what? I realized I probably didn't totally answer your question. So let me go back to that. So the difference when someone is coming from a behavioral science background, we're
Mhm.
not necessarily looking at saying, okay, we've got a training problem. This horse, for instance, doesn't load in the trailer. Okay, we got to figure out how to force him into the trailer.
Mhm.
Or this horse does not like to stand to be mounted. So we're going to teach him how he must stand still.
Mhm.
Instead, we take a very broader view of things. Number one, we're going to look at physical things. We want to rule out, are there any physical issues with the animal, pain, discomfort, disease, anything like that. So we work very closely with veterinarians, and we want to uh, identify and resolve any issues like that. Then we're also looking at the environment and the management of that animal, because being so ethology, I'm going to jump around a little bit. So ethology is the study of any species in its natural environment without interference from humans. And what happens with horses very often is we are housing them, we're keeping them in a way that doesn't really fit with what their ethology is about. So as a behavior consultant, we're going to look at management issues like, do they have friends? Do they have interaction with other horses?
Mhm.
What's their access to forage? Are they able to meet their needs, which are quite extensive in being able to forage all throughout a 24-hour cycle? And how about their ability to get out and move on their own unrestricted? So we're going to focus on those things. And then we're going to look at the emotional aspects of the horse. How are they feeling about things? And then we're going to look at what do they understand or don't they understand. So it's not just about, let's go and teach this horse that he must do that. No, no, no. Let's take a very bigger picture. And it's amazing how many behavior
Yeah.
problems we can solve just by first addressing the management and then looking at the underlying emotions and helping the horse overcome his fear of whatever the situation is.
Yeah. I love that. And it's actually something that I encourage people to look at. And maybe you have a case that might be similar, but some trainers that focus on the performance aspect. If a client has a horse that is having some problems, if the client can bring in a behavior consultant, it's a little bit of a different profession that even it's not bringing in another trainer, that it feels
Right,
competitive,
right.
and it's a way to get another view and look at that bigger picture.
Absolutely. Yeah, because if we can help the horse be happier in the other 23 hours of the day when we're
Mm-hmm.
not working with him directly, chances
Mm-hmm.
are he's going to be happier when we are training and working.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well put. So, is there an example that comes to mind for you?
Sure, sure. I can give an example of I'll give two quick examples. One, there was a horse that was very aggressive, had actually bitten quite a few people,
Mm-hmm.
had actually had a couple folks go into the hospital for some different sort of things, and was very aggressive around food, but just in general. And in that situation, of course, I spoke with the veterinarian. I confirmed with the, are we okay on the dental stuff? How's the hoof care? Make sure that we've got no underlying physical issue that we're dealing with. Um, and then really took a complete history to see what was going on, what are the contexts in which that horse was biting or acting aggressively. And the first thing we did was make sure that he now had access to forage. We put hay nets up in the pasture. We're like, let's just get him calm about food, because he was aggressive around food.
Mm-hmm.
And then we began to, instead of there being a unhappy, unpleasant association with people delivering food, because they'd kind of, to be safe, they'd try to smack him away
Yeah.
if he was coming in. We changed that, and we used a technique called positive reinforcement, which is basically um, horses. The way we deal with horses is, for the most part, they learn to do what we want to avoid something they don't like. That's pretty much it, right? We put a little pressure on the halter, they walk forward. We squeeze and pinch the fetlock, and they lift their foot. So they're pretty much doing what we want to avoid something they find annoying or aversive. When we use positive reinforcement, we change that, and we teach the horse to do something in order to earn a reward, something that he likes and wants to work with. Not just the removal of pressure, but either a certain bit of food or a scratch. And what we began with this horse was teaching him to touch an object with his nose, to target on an object, using a secondary reinforcer. For me, it's a tongue pop.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little sound that says, as soon as his nose touches it, oh, that's good, and here's a piece of carrot.
Yep.
So we changed the association for being around people so that he could learn to do something that produced a desired result for him, something he actually liked.
Mm-hmm.
And through a combination of that and reducing the requirements on him and freely feeding him and other things, we progressively reduced all of those aggressive behaviors, and there were no other recurrences of that. And then another recent case that I had was a horse that was in a rescue situation, and they couldn't really bridle him or get a halter on him. He was very, very head and ear shy.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that one, we began by just making an association of, if my hand is sort of near your ear or getting close and you don't move your head, I'll mark. I take my hand away, and here's your carrot.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of that, mark and carrot. And progressively to where I could put my hands up and the horse would move his head and bring his head and ear into contact with my hand. So we gave him the choice
Mm-hmm.
To reduce that fear and earn the reinforcement of the carrot. And we resolved that completely, and he can be bridled, and he was adopted out into a wonderful home.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, and I love another example that earlier today when we were walking around and we were looking at some of your horses,
Mm-hmm.
and you showed me the mare that you have that had a needle shy issue,
Yes.
and you were using essentially a start cue before you would even start, doing that
Right.
work with her at her neck. And it's one of the things I like about thinking about training in this way is giving the horse more choice, whereas you mentioned earlier, a lot of our kind of normal work with horses
Mm-hmm.
is we are we're kind of restricting or managing everything
Right.
more,
Right.
because we do have a halter on. We teach them to kind of tolerate different forms of restraint, but I think sometimes we forget that that little bit of a restraint tends to always be there.
Yeah. You know, it's amazing when you take everything off and you work with a horse at liberty, which I tend to do very early on with, especially with the behavior problem. I want that horse to have the opportunity to move away from me, because that's information. That says, hey, he's just not comfortable. So whether it's loose in a stall or loose in a round pen or an arena, if we can work at liberty, we get a lot of information about how that horse really feels about the situation. And you know, one of the things I say in my workshops or clinics or with individual client consults is that basically every animal, including us, we all do what we do, or we don't do something, to get more of what we like, less of what we don't like. That's what it is. It's just about that. Less of something I don't like, more of something I do like. And if the majority of what we do with our horses, they're doing what they do to get less of the pressure we put on them, think about that, the change of the mind, if now we start letting them do some things, showing them how to do things to earn something they like. And it really changes that underlying emotional response. And it doesn't mean that we don't require them to do things that we need them to do. And of course I have a halter on my horse and you need to come with me. But wherever we can allow that other paradigm, that other motivating operation thing to take place, it really, it makes their life happier, and I think it makes it a lot easier for us. And at least I find I get results faster and with a lot more joy for both of us.
Yeah. So tell me about the Iberian horses. It was a
Sure.
breed that I was pretty unfamiliar with, but they're definitely a beautiful horse. So
Sure.
how were you first attracted to the breed?
Well, I think I've kind of always worshipped from afar, right? So the Iberian horse, so the Iberian Peninsula is basically Spain and Portugal. So collectively, the horses are known as Iberians. And the Spanish horse, in the U.S. we call them Andalusians. Throughout the world, they're more known as the PRE, or Pura Raza Española. And then the horse from Portugal is the Lusitano, or Pura Sangue Lusitano. And they are just magical. What can I say? You know, I've always been attracted to the whole idea of the really high collection and the real artistic type of riding, where the expressions are about, like ballet. That's how I would describe it. So, you know, I love watching a gymnastic floor routine, right? The power and the music and the twists and the turns and the leaps. And it's powerful and it's beautiful. And then if you watch the Bolshoi ballet, you know, or just that sort of dance, and it still leaps and twirls and all this sort of stuff, but it's effortless. And there's a gracefulness and an artistry to it. And these horses were bred for centuries for the ability to have effortless high collection. And so the ease with which they can engage in that kind of balance, to me, is it's just beautiful. And so that's my love and my passion.
Yeah. So the Iberian horses include both breeds of the
Yes.
Lusitano and the Andalusian.
Yes, they do.
Do they, when you're breeding these, do they keep those two lines pretty pure, or is there breeding of both?
Well, I think that I can't remember which year it was. I mean, it wasn't too far in the distant past. Was it the 80s, 60s, 70s, somewhere in there, that actually the stud books were open and there was a lot of crossbreeding, you know, between them. And I don't know, nationalism comes into play and people like, oh no, we're going to have this. But you know what's very interesting to me is, like, so there's really the old school type. You know, you see the old engravings. If you go look at the engravings and the paintings like Velázquez and the kings of Spain and throughout Europe in the 15, 16, and 1700s, you see the nobility invariably riding an Iberian type horse. And so it was really more about type than it was about some exact names on a paper. And I think that my personal belief is that the best horses could still come from taking a Spanish horse and a Portuguese horse, because they do have slightly different qualities, and bringing those two together. And I've actually got a friend who's done that on numerous occasions and has produced amazing horses, and I'm thinking about that for my next breeding season as well.
How many do you usually breed in a season?
Just 2 to 3. You know, my husband's, oh, you got too many horses, and he's right. I got too many horses. Anybody want to buy a horse? But I don't ever want to breed just one, because for a foal to grow up without any interaction with another foal, especially if it's a colt, fillies maybe not as bad, but if it's a colt, I think that really puts them at a disadvantage throughout the rest of their lives in terms of being able to interact well with other horses.
If there was one thing that you wish more horse owners would know or understand, what would it be?
I'm going to credit my friend and colleague Lauren Fraser up in Canada. She coined this very easy to understand, what do horses need and want, the 3 F's: friends, forage, freedom. I think that that would be the most meaningful gift we could give our horses, is to do as much as we can to help their day-to-day living be closer to what, for them as a species, is important to them.
That's great. All right, well, thank you very much for having me at your farm.
Oh, it's been a delight. It's been a delight.
Letting me play with and ride your horse.
Yes, yes. You got to sit on Tejo. Yep. Wonderful.
And also doing this interview and sharing your knowledge with us.
Happy anytime.
Thanks.